I am a master of many things, such as the master of baguettes. I am also the master of procrastinating on the 30 Zelda challenge, as well as the master of, the master sword. But importantly, I am also the master of cultivating some horrible habits in speedrunning. It is no secret that habits can make or break just about everything in life, not just speedrunning. They are what can set apart whether you will succeed or fail at various things. I made a video last month talking about my speedrun burnout, and my conclusion was that I became afraid of failure, which therefore led me to stop enjoying speedrunning as a whole, considering failure is basically what it all is about. However, all of that stems from quite a few bad habits that I cultivated through many months of running, and when they build up for too long, can be really destructive. So with that said, I wanted to make a video today about the 5 worst habits I built up while speedrunning and reflect on them. Hopefully that may help you too. Without further ado, let's go. I basically, this is screwed.
It's unfair.
I want to start off this list with something that I think can definitely be a source of frustration among runners quite often. Resetting is inherently a part of speedrunning. That's not something that can be removed from the experience. And it makes sense. After all, why continue a run when you see that you committed too many mistakes for the run to reach the goal you were aiming for? What's the point? This one is an easy trap, because it is very tempting. And I mean, literally one button press away from doing it while knowing that it is irreversible, but you still won't do it, kind of tempting. When you fail, it's very easy to let your emotions take the best of you and then press the big R button. However, there are many benefits that can be gained from not resetting. One such benefit of doing no reset runs is that it can help practice late sections of a run while still being in run conditions. After all, if you keep resetting in early or mid game for example, then when do you ever actually get to the end of the run in actual run conditions? This can create a skill gap between your early to mid game compared to your end game, as you would naturally play much less of that section, which for obvious reasons isn't really the best approach, as it's always best to have a good practice and experience in all sections of your run. Beyond the extra experience you would get all throughout, another added benefit of doing no reset runs is that it can allow you to relax more and just increase your confidence, by allowing yourself to focus on just completing the run rather than being perfect and resetting at a slight mistake. Seeing the amount of completed runs increase on live split is superbly satisfactory. On that note, there was an interesting comment on my previous video by Blue Harvey talking about what is called the 100 completed runs challenge, which states that you should try to complete at the minimum 100 full runs of whichever game or category you are running. Well, that sounds obvious with such a name. Not sure what else you could expect, but nevertheless, at this point you can understand that working on being less trigger happy with the reset button can have multiple benefits for how you progress towards your goals. I know for certain that in the month leading up to my burnout, reset became my second name, and I could certainly benefit from this, as I feel this can be a good way to be less harsh on myself. Speaking of expectations, this one is definitely a bit broader, because the word expectations can be applied on so many aspects. It can, for example, be about the PB you want to achieve, or the amount of time you can give yourself to get a new PB, or even your ability to consistently perform certain tricks. Whichever area of speedrunning this applies to, being unrealistic can mean that if you don't meet those goals the way you expected, this can easily lead to great frustration. For my own case, I can definitely speak for my bad handling of the 3D Zelda challenge. Due to the nature of having to run multiple games, some of which I honestly found really difficult, totally not looking at you, Twilight Princess 90%, I not only set certain expectations on the good time I wanted to have before moving on, but I also felt like I needed to get that time quickly so I could then move on to the next game. While in that particular scenario, having a good time before moving on is definitely the right approach, rushing that goal is not. If I finished the run without PBing, I would be angry, because I felt like I was not getting closer to actually being good enough to move on to the next game for the challenge, instead of appreciating the fact that hey, I managed to pull a good sword and shield skip, and a really good Path of Twilight in that run. I would focus on where I failed, leading to not PBing, as I felt like I went further and further away from my goal. Of course, this is in the context of the 3D Zelda challenge, which is its own case, but this also applies in more common scenarios as well. That could be, for example, if you feel disappointed in yourself because despite constantly trying for months, you just can't get past a PB you've been trying to beat over and over again. Those kinds of things can set you on the wrong mentality, which it did for me. It can lead you to become very harsh against yourself, to the point it can only set you back rather than push you forward. While this doesn't mean you should drop any ambitious goals you have, this means you need to be kinder to yourself and understand that ambitious goals will be very difficult to achieve. Speaking of achievements, something very wise that Nordenix said as a comment on my previous video is that it's important to find a way to focus on the little things that you manage to complete for each run, even when you fail. These little things, in the end, are after all part of the momentum you build as you work towards your goal, so it's important to acknowledge them before letting high expectations let you down. However, high expectations do not just concern your personal goals. This would lead straight to our next topic. Let's be real here, much of speedrunning culture surrounds leaderboards and rankings, and as such, it's natural for people to compare themselves to other runners. And on a healthy amount, that's perfectly fine. It can help push you to improve, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with friendly competition. However, everybody progresses at different paces, and everyone has different strengths and weaknesses. To make it short, it can be quite easy to start feeling some sort of inferiority to others, because you, for example, feel like you are lagging behind compared to other runners. The reason why this is really bad is because it will only create a rift between you and the community of whichever game it is that you're running. I will admit, I am fully guilty of this mistake. Now, this mainly stems from my own insecurities as a person, frankly, but this is to show that insecurities definitely do not help. And also, I can add this sentence to my chest of obvious things that will make people wonder whether I have a brain. Either way, this might sound like a bit of a platitude, but the best thing to do is to focus on your own goals and your own progress rather than others. Basically, much like as I said for unrealistic expectations. Frankly, this is something that applies not just to speedrunning, but to life as well. It doesn't necessarily mean you gotta treat life like a game though, which leads to the next point. This fourth point is one that is definitely, I don't want to say meme-ish, but it is quite an oddity. Let's be honest, whether it be while playing casually or speedrunning, we've all had times where something bad happens. We get angry and we just yell something along the lines of I hate this game and can go die. More or less. Sure, when that happens once in a while, it's okay. I dare say, it's fun. It's important to express your frustration after all. However, in the context of speedrunning, something that can happen is that it can become easy for someone, totally not me, to start getting fixated on the idea that the game is not letting you progress, for example. If there are particular moments in a run you keep failing and can't improve on despite all your efforts. It's definitely hard to put into words exactly what I mean, but the idea is that the part of the frustration will be directed towards the game rather than the lack of progress, if that makes sense. Where this may be even more prominent is in the case where RNG is involved, in which case it's even more of a grey area, since the game actually does have an influence you, as runner, do not necessarily have control over. However, in excess, this kind of mentality can easily lead to just straight up disliking the game, which is what happened with me with both Breath of the Wild and Twilight Princess in particular. Skyward Sword was somewhat spared, but it could also have happened. Beyond making you dislike the game, another potential effect is hindering your progress. In my own case, this led to building up a sort of pride where instead of working on improving in the areas that needed work, I just felt like I had a sort of grudge against the game, which is not where you want your focus to be when speedrunning. Now, I also gotta warn about the extreme opposite, of which I also am guilty of, which is to completely blame yourself too much. It's important to take responsibility for your mistakes, but it's even more important to be able to focus on fixing them. And for that, this shall lead to the final point. Yes, there will be lack of proper practice. I honestly believe that if I didn't have the bad habit of neglecting practice, this could single-handedly have prevented me from burning out of speedrunning, more than any of the other ones. The theme of practice is something that has been looming over this whole video and has been of importance for every other point so far. And yet, in my own experience, I just refused to properly handle practice. This led to my build-up in frustration, therefore leading to my busting passion for speedrunning. Now, of course, the important question will be what we mean by proper practice, proper being the key word here. Well, there isn't any one method that will work for everyone, as everyone is different. However, there are definitely some factors that can be taken into consideration and can be potential sources of ideas for you to find that suits you best. For example, a comment from Scary One on my previous video talks about a method of practice where you can only consider yourself consistent on a trick if you can do it 10 times in a row. This definitely requires a lot of work, but it is also more effective than me doing it 3 times, as well as just going on with doing a first run of a new game or category before ensuring I am even consistent at half the difficult tricks. There is also something else I started doing ever since I came back to speedrunning with Breath of the Wild any %, which was to draft up a whole spreadsheet where I would document my specific areas of strength, of weaknesses, and more. The idea is to be able to track progress in a more tangible manner. And so, if I ever want to go into a practice session, I directly know what I need to focus on. Of course, it's pretty bare bones at the moment, but I suppose you get the idea. I realize it's very important for me to be able to tangibly see what are my areas of improvement so I can work on them more effectively. How you want to track your progress in the end is really up to you, however. In the end, by getting into the habit of doing more proper practice, I know that this will ultimately help me getting better results. So likewise, if you are like me and have a tendency to skip on practice, then working on fixing that bad habit will definitely help you be a better runner in the end. And that's it for this video. I hope it may have been at least somewhat useful to you. I know it has for me, as thinking and reflecting about my own poor habits has been a good way for me to get on my path to improve. Either way, I'd be curious to hear about you and how you have worked on improving on some bad habits you may have had yourself, or if there are any others you can think of that I haven't touched upon. I have now started getting back to speedrunning recently after my burnout, and for the first time in months, I actually enjoyed myself doing it, which is an absolute pleasure to see after struggling about that for so long. As such, I do think that I will be able to start my journey to the 3D Zelda challenge once again, hopefully soon enough. Cheers everyone, and bye!